Muy buenos días a todas, todos. Veo varios nombres conocidos ya
Good
conectándose.
morning, everyone. I can see several
Me parece
names
si silenciamos los
that
micros, así
are
me voy
connecting right
como
now. It's a pleasure to
guiando.
be with you.
Escuché el
Please,
inicio, Diego, ¿qué tal?
let's silence
Nos
the
vimos ya en un
microphones.
webinar y ahora nos vemos
It's
en
a pleasure,
presencial.
Diego. We
Dale, qué
saw
gusto,
each
qué
other in
gusto
a
de
webinar.
iniciar
Now we are
mañana.
seeing
Buenos
again each
días,
other
buenos días. Buenos días a todas
in
y a
this
todos.
workshop.
Un
Good
placer
morning,
tenerlos
everyone. It's a
conectados el día
pleasure
de hoy
to
con
be connected
ustedes.
today with you.
Bienvenidos y bienvenidas
Welcome
a nuestra segunda
to
ronda
our
de
second
consulta del
round of
proyecto
consultation for
Restaurando
the Restoring
Confianza en Ecuador.
Hope
Mi
project,
nombre es Cassandra Llosa,
Restoring Hope
ya
in
conoces
Ecuador project.
de
I
tantas
am
sesiones
Cassandra
anteriores.
Llosa.
Es
You
un placer
already
estar
know
con
me
ustedes
from so
aquí.
many
Yo
sessions
trabajo como
together.
analista de involucramiento
It's
de
a pleasure to
actores
be
clave
here.
en
I
el
work as
Programa
an
Mundial
analyst
para el
of
Desarrollo
the
para el Perú
key
en Nueva York.
actors for
Sin
the
embargo, yo
development
estoy basada en
United
Lima,
Nations Development
Dominicana, como
Project.
ustedes, país
I am
vecino.
based in
Y bueno,
Peru,
nos acompaña también como
your neighboring country. And today
co-facilitadora y
we
compañera de la sesión
have
del día de hoy,
our
María
colleague
Verónica Córdoba,
from
quien
our
es
session
consultora
today, Maria
nacional
Verónica
para
Córdoba,
el
a
Ecuador,
national
y quien va
consultant
a
in
acompañarnos
Ecuador.
entonces y dar una breve introducción.
And she will be with us today and
Muchos se conocen a Vero,
introduce
pero de todas formas,
herself
cuéntame.
briefly. Many
Buenos
of
días a
you already
todos.
know
Muchas
you,
gracias
Vero, but
por estar aquí en
we
este
hear you.
segundo taller del proyecto. Soy
Good
María Verónica
morning,
Córdoba,
everyone.
consultora
Thank you for this
jurídica,
invitation to this
reconocida mundialmente
project.
como consultora
I
nacional
am
en este proyecto
currently
Restoring la Esperanza en
supporting as
Ecuador.
a
Muchas
national
gracias por su
consultant
presencia. Por favor,
in
no me
the
facilita llegar.
Restoring
Lo
Hope
cual hace
project
que
in
el proceso
Ecuador.
de
If you
consulta
have
sea
any
mucho más
doubt,
realista.
please, or question, please don't hesitate to
Gracias,
write
María
it and
Verónica.
we will answer
Entonces,
it.
antes de
Thank you.
empezar, algunos
Thank you,
aspectos
Maria Veronica. So
logísticos
before we
que
begin with
quisiéramos revisar con
some
ustedes para que fluya
logistic
nuestra
aspects
comunicación. Si bien ya
in order
somos
for our communication to
prácticamente
flow
expertos en el uso
with
de
these
estas plataformas como Zoom,
technical
quería comentarles que
abilities. Without
contamos con
them, we couldn't
interpretación
communicate. So we
simultánea del
have
español al inglés y se
interpretation,
reconoce a
simultaneous
algunos
interpretation
indicadores
to
el día de hoy
English
que
and
no hablan
Spanish
español.
because some of
Les dejo
our
a Adriana Arcaute y a Angie
members
Díaz como
today don't
intérpretes que nos
talk
acompañarán.
English or
Comenzamos con la
Spanish.
presentación.
So we thank our
Pasamos
interpreters, Adriana and
a la
Angie.
opción de
Please see the
interpretación.
interpretation
Clasifique el
option
canal de
in
su
the
preferencia y le solicitamos que se
bottom of your
mantenga todo el
screens
tiempo. Yo voy a pasar ahorita
and
al canal
click
de
on your
español.
preferred language. I am
Así
going
que
to
entonces
move
que
to the Spanish
apoyen,
channel
por favor,
right now. So I
las
will
personas
appreciate that
escuchándome en
you support
inglés
me.
en hacerme un
The colleagues
gesto,
that are listening in
una
English, please
reacción
raise your
de que me
thumbs
están escuchando bien.
so
Marión
I know
está
that you are
mostrando bien.
hearing me
Marión,
well.
entonces todo
Thank
conforme
you,
con su
Marion. So
indicación.
everything
También le
good
solicitamos
with
que podamos hablar
interpretation.
de manera
I would
pausada. Esto
also like to
vamos a hacer
request
a veces cuando
you
ya se
if you could
corre el
please
taller,
talk
cuando la gente
slowly,
empieza a correr la
because
sesión,
when
es un poco
as the
complicado, pero
workshop begins to
ya saben, si tienen algún problema
run,
técnico a lo largo de la
everyone
sesión,
starts
por
speaking
favor, le envían
quicker.
un
So
mensaje
if
a
you
mi
have any
colega
problem,
María Verónica Córdoba. Ella
any
está
technical
cuidando
problem,
su
please
correo
write to
electrónico
our
también en el
colleague
chat. Guárdenlo
Maria Cordova.
y
She's
entonces
writing in
comuniquen de
the
manera
chat.
hablada para que
Please
no
keep it and
distraigamos la sesión
communicate.
del día de hoy con aspectos
Let's
técnicos
communicate
que
through
podamos
that so we
conocer.
don't get distracted
Recordemos que
in
los
our
micrófonos
workshop
deben de estar
because of the Zoom
silenciados
platform.
durante la
Remember
sesión
that
para que nos
the
podamos comunicar
microphones should be
claramente. Le
silenced
cuento
during this
rápidamente
session so
porque
we
luego
can
quiero
communicate
participar y en
fluidly.
cada una de las presentaciones va a
And
haber una sesión de
in each
preguntas, respuestas y
presentation, we will have a
comentarios
session of
y
questions
pueden
and answers
levantar
and
la mano
comments. So you
virtualmente y
can raise
entonces
your
aparece en la
hand
pantalla de
virtually.
reacciones,
There
levanta la
is
mano
an
o
option
también
in
en el chat.
the bottom
Bueno, lo
part
voy
of your
apareciendo en
screen.
todas las pantallas
You
para
can
que
raise your hands. I will
alguien
be
puede
paying attention
levantar la mano
to the
físicamente.
raised
Sí,
hands. But
Ricardo, no logra escuchar nada.
Ricardo,
Ahí
so
mi
you can't
colega
hear anything.
María Verónica te va a ayudar en el
My
chat
colleague,
explicándote cómo
Maria
activar
Veronica, will help
interpretación.
you
Yo ya
through the
activé mi
chat
canal
how
en
to
español.
activate
Ricardo
interpretation,
debería
as I
poder
already
escucharme. Gracias,
activated
Vero.
my channel in Spanish.
Bueno, tenemos un
They
grupo ya
can
de
hear me. Thank you,
personas,
Vero. So we have a
32
diverse group
participantes
now of 31
inscribiéndonos. Podemos
participants.
presentar
Not
todos
all
los
of us
ponentes, nada más
can
que
introduce
vaya a la
ourselves
tarde.
because
Sí les pediría, por favor, que puedan
it will
renombrarse
take us a long time.
del
So I
nivel de
will ask you
participantes. Hay un
to
icono
rename
ahí
yourselves in
de
your
más donde
participants
ustedes
list
pueden cambiar
there is an icon that you can use to change your name. So mine, for example, is Cassandra Llosa from the UNDP. So you can do the same and write your name and the organization where you come from. And also in the chat, you can introduce yourself. And what about if we take a group photo? So if you can please turn on your cameras and we can take a group photo. Diego, I've already seen your screen background, so I recognize you. It's a pleasure to see you all. So Vero, please tell me when you are ready, when the photo is ready. So we have two screens. You let me know. Everything is ready. Perfect. Many thanks. A pleasure to see you in the camera, all of you, if possible. So we continue with the session. To officially launch this consultation round, I would like to give the floor to Monica Andrade, who is responsible of the environmental and energy area in Ecuador. Monica, we hear you. Thank you, Cassandra. Good morning, everyone. I would like to address you with some short words to begin this workshop. Mariana Irene Schultz, good morning. The delegates and authorities from the Subsecretary of Water Resources and Climate Change and the Natural Heritage of the Ministry of Environment and Water and Ecology Transition, the Management of International Cooperation and Management on Information, representatives from the public institutions and the non-government organizations that have been part of this project. Since from the UNDP, it's a great pleasure to be with you during this second part of the project, Restoring Hope in Ecuador. I would like to extend my special welcoming to everyone and the Ministry of the Environment and Water and Ecology Transition, and both the public and private audience and social civility. The degradation and climate change processes, as well as desertification and degradation, relate through a common solution, which is focusing restoration on landscapes. At global level, the biodiversity conventions, the CDB and the climate change CMNUCC, and the fight against desertification CNULD, as well as the Paris Agreement and the global frame of biodiversity, CARMEN Montreal, recognize the importance of strengthening restoration efforts. In that sense, the countries have defined the neutrality goals regarding land degradation and the land strategies of biodiversity and national determined contributions. That's why the UNDP, together with the Convention on Biological Diversity, we have joined efforts in this global initiative to restore hopes in Ecuador and to contribute in the development of the implementation of an effective restoration, just as is planned in the different national policies and as is established in the 2008 Constitution and the global orders like the 2030 Agenda. In Ecuador, there are concrete initiatives like the National Project of Landscape Restoration implemented by the ministry, which objective is to intervene in 30,000 hectares, and the National Action Plan for Conservation and Restoration, Sustainable Restoration Use of Paramos, and Pro Amazonia, that supports the environmental authority and the action implementations for forestry restoration and strengthening capacities. Through this Restoring Hope project, we seek to contribute to an analysis of political priorities for restoration together with a cartography analysis and the best information, geospatial information available to create a dossier that proposes the optimization of the selected areas, the priority areas for restoration. So through this work, we developed this document and mapping that will contribute to the implementation of restoration actions in the country at national level. And finally, I would like to thank everyone for your participation and commitment during the development of this project. This is key in order to achieve the best from the consultation. And I wish you success. And we hope that this meeting is useful to contribute for an Ecuador more sustainable. I also want to take advantage of this space to thank the colleagues from the UNDP and the consultant team from Ecuador who has been able to articulate this meeting with all of you. So thank you so much for dedicating the time today. And I hope this session will be very productive. Thank you, Cassandra. Thank you, Monica. I thank as well the company of the country office from the beginning of this project, and also how we can use the power of the spatial data to produce this dossier. So now we will give the floor to Irene Schut, the director of the Ministry of the Water, Ecology Transition, and water resources. We hear you, Monica. Good morning, everyone.
Este encuentro del día de hoy, cuyo objetivo es presentar la versión actualizada del
Our
documento.
objective is to present the updated version of the dossier document, Restoring Hope in Ecuador, and of course, to hear your feedback of the key actors. I also want to welcome you to this second part of the Restoring Hope project and thank the UNDP for its amazing collaborative work, and also the contribution from all the different sectors, participants from the public and private sectors. We are in a critical moment at the moment. We have degraded a great percentage of land, and we can see every day how this threatens to the species in risk of extinction is growing. So before this crisis, the environmental and water and ecology transition has implemented actions and norms to restore ecosystems, especially the forestry and Andean ecosystems. That's why we decided to participate in this global project, which is part as well of the biodiversity, ecological biodiversity project. And we are with other countries like Chile, Colombia, Kazakhstan, and other countries that are participating. And after several months of work in the creation of the dossier that we will see next, we begin with the second meeting. For us in Ecuador, this is still a huge challenge, the same as for the rest of the countries, to really implement effective action. So this workshop today is proof that we are building a clear route to scale at national level and achieve these national goals related to these issues. So I want to thank your support from all sectors, especially the UNDP, who has been working with us not only in this project, but in many, many other programs and projects that we have implemented and we will implement in the next years. And I wish you the best in this workshop, and I hope it's successful. I'm sorry that I turned off my camera, but this is because of connectivity issues. Thank you so much for being with us today and welcoming again. Thank you, Maria Irene, for your representation and introduction to this workshop. So to all our participants, please don't hesitate to introduce yourself, both in the chat and renaming yourselves. So we have several people here from different institutions, especially from the Environmental Institute Ministry. So we will review quickly the objectives of our workshop today related to the entire project. Let's remember that we had a first consultation round in the 5 pilot countries where we are working that Irene mentioned. So now we are having the second consultation round to end this project in Ecuador, and also to guarantee that the work includes all your feedback. So I will request my colleague Veronica to share with you in the chat the final version of the agenda that everyone has in their call, but anyway, to have it on hand. So thank you, Vero. As a reminder, this is the goals of the project in Ecuador. The first one is to identify and prioritize the areas where the political responsibles can adopt measures of restoration to comply with the national commitments in terms of biodiversity and degradation of land. The second one is to review the strategic priorities of the country in terms of restoration. And the third one is to determine the data, the global and national data necessary for the analysis, and also to apply the planification, the systematic planification of conservation from a scientific perspective. And remember, this is a global event, we will try to take advantage the best possible of this meeting, especially the feedback from you, in order to complement this dossier in the best way possible. Remember that the first consultation was in September 12th, and we have the second consultation, as you can see today. Those who couldn't attend to the first consultation or don't have the info or report from the call, my colleague Veronica is sharing it with you in the chat. In the first consultation that we had in September 12th, we focused ourselves in understanding the vision of the project, as well as this first version of the dossier draft for Ecuador. And we also spent time reviewing the data sets to help the scientific team to work in the degradation map and the restoration priority areas. This was the first step for a very throughout work or minutious work that was led by Maria Veronica Cordova. And the idea was to capture this feedback and the data sets that were going to be used and the points to improve. And thanks to that, we can share today a new version and see what we have updated in this dossier. For Ecuador, we will see presentations that will show everything included from your feedback from the first consultation, and we will review again the map of the prioritization areas of restoration. And we will also understand or have a very interactive session with you for the review. And also we will let you know that we are going to hand this in so you can have a fair time for you to send us your feedback about what is introduced today or presented today. It also includes, of course, the company of Maria Veronica Cordova, or accompaniment of Monica Cordova to all of the organizations that are with us today. And my colleague Veronica also will copy the link about this in the chat. So here is the detailed agenda. As I said, we will have this first presentation about the updated version of the dossier, and regarding the main points updated, we will have the authorized version of the degradation map and the data collected in the first part, and we will have the umbrella actions for Ecuador, and from there we will navigate through this prioritization map of the areas that are in charge of Oscar Venter, that we will do this complementary with the feedback exercise, and we will see that this map, we can improve it, and as well as the prioritization analysis, and we can see what will be the priority areas. We will also have a presentation from the biodiversity lab, and we will show you the restoration versions, the most recent restoration versions, and the work generated for this project. So we have our colleague here that is having some technical issues. Veronica, if you can help us with that. So before moving to the presentations and the heart of our session, I wanted to thank the institutions that make possible this consultation and the general project in Ecuador, which are the Office of the UNDP in Ecuador, which has been from the beginning in the design and execution of the project, and also the Ministry of the Environment, Water and Ecology Transition, that has worked in the natural heritage and the information and the national program of landscape restoration, and especially the part related to Galapagos. And I hope not to stop including anything. Please let me know in the chat. You have helped us with your feedback and your comments in order to get to the second draft that we will present. This project was also possible thanks to the biological biodiversity convention plan. So with that, I think I've spoken a lot. So let's move to the presentation about what we have updated in this second version of the dossier. And for that, we will have first the presentation of my colleague, Maria Veronica, the national consultant of the project in Ecuador. We hear you, Maria Veronica.
Gracias, Cassandra. Voy a compartir la pantalla. Lili, ¿puedes compartirla, por favor, para iniciar la presentación?
Thank you, Cassandra. I will thank you. Thank you for all who have just connected. We would like to start this first part of the workshop with general details of the conditions of the first 2 months after the first workshop, where we have received feedback from several institutions related to environment. I would like to thank the ministry, the Secretary of Climate Change and Biodiversity, the colleagues of Programa Montañas who have given very valuable feedback, and also the approach towards the ground part of Galapagos Islands. Next slide, please. The objective of this session is to give an outline of the updated version of the dossier about the two main chapters. The first part that was mentioned in the first workshop about general outlines of restoration in Ecuador. Next slide. In this first chapter, which is very descriptive of what we have now, the main update was the spatial areas and the financial situation for restoration in Ecuador, and we will give a mapping of hope, and we will give spatial data and the maps that were updated so as to give to go to the ground and the results of the maps. Next slide. So the main general outlines that have been updated are the main goals that are the goals of the landscape, the 30,000 hectares that want to be restored, then also the Plan Nacional de Sequía and the Plan Nacional de Conservación of the moors that has been approved, and the specific objective is to be is under restoration, and also Plan Nacional de Adaptación al Cambio Climático, National Adaptation Plan to Climate Change, which have been included in the maps. The financial situation, we have made a financial analysis of fiscal analysis within the different projects, PNP, and also different projects, foreign projects of pro-Amazonia projects, the project of payments by results, and the program Montañas of the GIZ. And next slide. In terms of the mapping of the HOPE project, there are spatial aspects. There's a map of the degradation. We can say that in the team of the ministry, the degradation reported in the PRAIS 4 report, we have joined it with the methodology, and we have a degradation map that is much robust. And in this second version, with together with Parque Nacional Galapagos, as we haven't mapped degradation in the ground area of Galapagos Islands. It's mainly based in the ground area. We used a methodology previously used in Galapagos Islands in urban and rural areas combined in this invasive areas. So we have been able to map the Galapagos areas, which are protected So we have taken into account the invader areas. So there have been changes in terms of degraded areas from 54 to 65%. In terms of national stages, we have taken the different stages, and in general, the priorities areas of restoration, we have to get to the 30% of global objective. There's a significant change in the first version. We had 40,000 square kilometers, and in this version, we incremented this to 50,000 square kilometers. That's a general outline of the aspects that have been outlined. Each of my colleagues will give more specific details about each of these updates. If you have any questions, please you can write on the chat. Thank you very much, Maria Veronica. If you have any questions, as Veronica said, you can raise your hands or write on the chat. Probably we will get more questions and we get more details about the updates. So we can go to Scott Atkinson, who will give more details about the well, Scott is not together with us. He lives in Australia. It's the middle of the night there, and he has shared a video with us. We have scientifics with us, so we will listen to his video.
Good day, everybody. For those who were joining in on the very first meeting of this restoration project in Ecuador, you will remember that we
Perdón, Lili, hay
presented
que
to
bajar
you
un
how
poco el
we had
volumen del
delineated.
audio. Disculpa, perdón, solo para que bajes un poco el volumen porque va a superponerse la interpretación sobre el video, entonces si no va a ser difícil para los que estamos escuchando en español. Intentemos una vez más y me comentan los demás si escuchan bien.
Restoration project in Ecuador, you will remember that we presented to you how we had and how we defined the restoration zone that we'll be using further on in this project. We data sets, which is a project to map degradation based on SDG indicators. World cover data from the ES, focusing uniquely on urban and agricultural areas and that land cover data. So now with some feedback and some further access to more national data, we have rebuilt, redesigned, and in this the layers that we've replaced to create restorations. First of all, is we're using a nationally produced degraded areas layer. Urban agricultural areas. We also use that same global human footprint layer. And finally, because I noticed there was no restoration zone in Galapagos, the data sets we were using, we've included some national rural buffer and invasive species data sets to ensure that we're capturing some parts of the Galapagos that would be suitable for restoration. Firstly, again, there's this national integrated areas layer. This was produced in Kondison in 2013. You will notice from this data set there is no mapped degraded areas within the Galapagos archipelago. It's all restricted to the mainland of Ecuador. But you will see that it's fairly ubiquitous across the country. Those areas in orange are the areas that are mapped as degraded in the country. This is I'm not sure exactly what the inputs resolution of this data set is, but we have converted it to a 250 meter pixel size. Secondly, we're using nationally derived language data sets for both urban and agricultural areas. So for the urban data set, we subset it a little bit further to incorporate artificial surfaces, infrastructure, and with Spanish being very poor, I think that means populated places, areas pobladas. In agricultural, we've included plantation forests, agricultural lands, and I'm not going to pass these out. Land. Again, my Spanish is worse. I do apologize for that. But you will see in this map, we haven't shown a legend of it, but these orange areas are the agricultural lands in the country. So it's very significant part of the country is captured within this agricultural band. We're again using the global human footprint layer. This is a new version of it produced at approximately 100 meter resolution. We have aggregated that to 250 to be able to work alongside the planning unit layer that we're using in the country. This footprint layer does capture areas within the Galapagos, as you can see, and we consider areas with a human footprint of greater than 4 to be those that have areas that have been degraded by human actions. And then finally, we have the Galapagos. As I've mentioned before, both of the data sets we were using in the first iteration of this project, the data coverage in the Galapagos essentially removed from the optimization and prioritization models that we run. We have changed that now by incorporating data for the islands, as well as urban-rural buffer on you tend to go a little bit hand in hand. Obviously, quite often invasive plants spill over from urban areas. And so we've included these in the Galapagos. We've rasterized these wood polygons at 250 meters as well. How do we put these all together? We're doing this all in language because that's where prioritizer, which is the systematic constellation planning tool we use to run the optimizations. And so there's a little bit of code in the middle there that shows what we are doing, but essentially saying if an area is either agriculture, it's either urban, it's all this urban, or if it's mapped as degraded, for the degraded areas map, or if the area has a human footprint value greater than 4, or if it's within the urban rural buffer in the Galapagos, or within the invasive species layer in the Galapagos, we map it as a degraded area in the country, and therefore it falls into the restoration zone. Again, we map this restoration zone to 250 meters. So looking at the map shown around it, these areas in blue are the areas that we mapped as degraded in the country, and those areas in gray are those that are not mapped as degraded. So all further prioritization and optimization work that we'll be doing will be limited to this restoration zone of the country. If there are any questions, please feel free to bring them up. We'll speak to you again soon.
Muchísimas gracias. Disculpen a los colegas que no pudieron
Thank you very much. Sorry about the video. We listened to it in both languages at the same time. If you have any questions about what Scott presented, because Disan and Oscar Bender is with us, and probably your doubts will be able to answer your doubts. For the time being, there are no doubts. As we get this presentation about the final data used to generate this priorities map, then we will have more questions. Then we will have this more interactive session. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Cassandra. And hi, everyone. I'm Dee. I'm a spatial planning and biodiversity expert with UNDP. It's a pleasure to be here and good to see you all again. Next slide, please. During the first consultation, we have received many useful advice from you on what layers should be updated and what are the other important features we should consider in this mapping process. Thanks to you all, and thank you, Maria, for your incredible help in reaching out to the stakeholders and collecting this data, and my colleague Latika in processing them. We now have integrated your suggestions within the second iteration of Restoration Priority Map. So my presentation here is to help you review the overall data structure and data used in the mapping process with a focus on the updates and changes made after the first iteration. Next slide, please. With that, I want to start my presentation with a recap of the overall data structure. Next slide, please. We can broadly break the data down into 4 groups: base map, planning features, zones, and optionally the locking constraints. Each data group has slightly different requirements on the spatial data. As a brief summary, the base map defines the range and scale of our planning area. Here we are doing a national scale map for Ecuador. So we are using the official national boundary of Ecuador as the base map. Then the planning area will be divided into a set of discrete areas. In GIS term, it equals to pixels of a raster layer, where each unit can be independently calculated and selected. In the current iteration of the prioritization map, we used the 250 meter as the resolution for the map. The next data group, also our main focus here, is the planning features. These are data layers that can spatially identify restoration needs as well as benefits. Here we are using the same clusters introduced by Elsa. We broadly group these planning features in biodiversity, climate change mitigation, and human well-being. And then the third data group is zones. Zones can determine where the restoration action can be implemented within the country. This is the spatial hard constraint for the analysis to select restoration priority areas only within the zone defined. My colleague Scott just introduced the zone we used for this analysis, which is the degraded areas nationally defined in Ecuador. The last data group is an optional selection, the locking constraints. By selecting an area to lock in, it ensures that the final restoration map will include these areas. And in the case of Ecuador, we have locked in areas under restoration actions from the National Landscape Restoration Project. Next slide, please. All right, with an overview in mind, here is the full list of planning features included in the analysis to help you identify where are the most important areas to restore while maximize multiple benefits in biodiversity, ecosystem services, climate change mitigation, as well as sustainable livelihoods. I wouldn't go through each of the layers in detail, as we already did that during the first round of workshop. But if you're interested to find out more detailed description for each feature used, I'm asking my colleague Maria to drop a link to the chat with the metadata for each features used in this analysis. Next slide, please. But here I do want focus on the changes and updates we made in the second iteration, which is highlighted in different color. Layers highlighted in yellow are the same features used in the first iteration, but we have updated the data to the latest available year. And then layers in blue color are new features we added into the analysis. And by the third column, you can see that all of these layers are from national data in Ecuador, except one layer, which is the carbon deficit, that we used a global scale layer for the year 2023. Next slide, please. With that, I want to start my presentation with an With that, now I will introduce the updated layer. Next slide, please. We will start with the ecosystem features updated with the most recent year, include native forest. This layer is updated with the latest land cover data in the year 2020. Next slide, please. And we have extracted the native forest information from this land cover data. Next slide, please. Same with mangrove. This is also updated to the year 2022. Next slide, please. And for Patamos, we also updated the coverage of Patamos according to the land cover data for the year 2020. Next slide, please. And same updates for the capacity of land use in protection forest. This is updated according to the latest available capacity of land use layer in the year 2020. Next slide, please. And same from the same data set, we also updated the production forest. Next slide, please. And then we also updated the national soil organic carbon layer to the latest available year in the 2021. Next slide, please. And then we also updated the conservation area social forest program to the 2022 data. These are areas that maintain native forest, Paramo, and other native vegetation formations belonging to natural or legal persons that comply with objectives indicated in the agreement established by the social forest program. Next slide, please. And then another updated layer is the water protection areas. Previously, we're using the information from the year 2020, but now we have a latest available information for the year 2023. So we replaced this layer with the new data provided by MATE. Next slide, please. Great. And next couple layers are new features added into the analysis. The first one is the National System of Protected Areas. And this layer used to be used in the ALSA project as a locking constraint for protection. But here we have added the protected area as a feature to help guide the selection of restoration priorities, as the degraded areas in protected area are important to implement restoration actions. Next slide, please. And similarly, we also added the connectivity corridor areas, as they also provide important biodiversity or ecosystem service value. These are special areas for biodiversity conservation, and we have added the latest available layer for the year 2023 provided by the Ministry of Environment. Next slide, please. The next few features are new features added from the Ministry of Environment about the climate risk. And this data sets include 4 different layers in climate risks. This one on the slide is the level of drought threat modeled under RCP 8.5 scenario for the period of 2016 to 2040. Next slide, please. And then there's also levels of intense rainfall threat predicted based on the trend of increasing number of days with heavy rainfall. Next slide, please. And the third climate risk layer is about very high temperature threats. This is modeled with the trend of increasing number of days per year with extreme maximum temperatures. Next slide, please. Our last new feature here is about the level of frost threat. Next slide, please. And above are the planning features updated or newly added for this iteration of restoration priority. For the lock-in area, as introduced earlier, we also updated this information to the latest available year. These are areas under restoration actions from National Landscape Restoration Project, and it also contains information of areas that have been intervened since 2018. Next slide, please. All right, so above is an overall review of the updates for the layer used in the analysis. I hope that's helpful. With that, thank you, and back to you, Cassandra.
Claro que sí, muchísimas gracias, Dee, por tu explicación y
Many
también...
thanks, Dee, for your explanation, and also everyone has the link in the chat and the detailed information of the data layers used for the analysis that has been possible thanks to your comments and feedback. If we have any questions, please remember that Maria Veronica Veronica is with us, and you can raise your hands virtually, so you can comment, and also you can write in the chat. If there isn't any question, I can pass to the Oscar Venter presentation, and we can move to the transition of feedback and review of the prioritization areas for restoration. It seems that there has no questions. There hasn't any questions. So now we will we will give the floor to my colleague in Ecuador regarding the restoration layers. We hear you, Oscar.
Oh, thank you, Cassandra. Sorry, I misunderstood who you were handing the mic to. Hi, everybody. Before jumping into my presentation, I'd just like to reflect on what Di Zhang just presented. Seeing incredible diversity of national data, and much of it is very recent, which really speaks to the quality of data being developed and maintained in Ecuador. We're running a little bit behind. I think we're about 15 minutes behind, so I'm going to try to be quite quick in my presentation to give us some time to have a little break afterwards. So I'm going to focus on not our full work plan, which I'm showing you here on this slide, but rather the restoration priority map. I'm going to show that map quickly in this presentation. We'll look at it more closely later. And then I'm going to spend a fair bit of time on an analysis which you haven't seen before. It wasn't part of the first consultation. It's unpacking the restoration map to look at different forms of restoration across Ecuador, what might be suitable where. Next slide, please. So just a reminder of our, next slide, please. Thank you. Just a reminder that our overall mission here is to harness systematic conservation planning to identify priority places in Ecuador for restoring ecosystems, such that that restoration maximizes benefits to biodiversity, climate change, and human well-being. So the analytical framework that we're using that brings all this data together is systematic conservation planning. Next slide, please. We've went into a little bit more detail in our first consultation on what systematic conservation planning is, but just a quick recap here. We're using a software package called Prioritize R. It's coded in the R language, free and available to everybody. The way we're using it has three basic components. First, we're trying to meet area-based targets for restoration. So in our case, it's to achieve 30% restoration of the degraded areas that we've mapped in Ecuador, which is the data that Scott was showing you earlier. Then, in terms of looking for places to restore, we only want to consider areas where that action is feasible and will have benefits. So the action of restoration is constrained only to degraded areas in Ecuador. And finally, the heart of the optimization is to actually select areas that will maximize the benefits for biodiversity, climate change, and human well-being. Next slide, please. So that's where the bulk of the data that Dee was just talking about comes in. It's to actually map these values across Ecuador, to map biodiversity, map climate change, map human well-being. In front of you, you can see the heat maps for all these different values. And by a heat map, I just mean it's an overlay of all those individual layers Dee was talking about. So the optimization is trying to select areas which are the hottest for these values. Next slide, please. So this is the result. This is what's come from the optimization to meet the restoration target in ways that maximize its benefits. These are the priority areas for restoration. They cover 19.5% of Ecuador's land area, both continental land and as well as the Galapagos Islands, as Scott was highlighting in his talk. So we're not going to look too closely at this right now. This is the important map. This is the main result from all of the work. But later after the break, I'm going to show you the map in a using a web tool so we can look at it in more detail together. I just want to highlight now a challenge with restoration. We normally think about restoration as fully restoring ecosystems to their baseline or reference condition, the ecosystem that they were before. However, because of a range of factors, this might not be possible in all cases. Next slide, please. For instance, if we think about land cover, current land cover, some places like cities, towns, some industrial and mining areas, as well as croplands. These are highly modified landscapes. These are really now human landscapes, and they might be impossible to fully restore to original reference conditions. Next slide, please. Similar to this is a similar concept, but a different mapping approach. This is using the human footprint. Places with very high human footprint might not be possible to fully restore. Next slide, please. Now, one final factor is the projected impacts of climate change. Biomes in Ecuador, this is the maps that you're seeing here from current to future conditions, are projected to change. So it might not be possible to restore a certain ecosystem if it's projected to transition to a different ecosystem. For instance, it appears like in the Amazon, or maybe it's just the foothills of the Andes, there are currently biomes of shrublands and shrubby wooded areas that are projected to transition to tropical forest, potentially because of increased rainfall. So this will be a biome shift, and there are other examples in the maps you can see here. Next slide, please. So for this analysis, we actually start to disentangle the overall priority map into 3 different forms of restoration: full ecosystem restoration versus ecosystem rehabilitation versus ecosystem recovery. And I'm going to introduce these to you. Next slide, please. So first, ecological restoration. This is to restore the degraded ecosystem to a condition that is similar to the pre-disturbance ecosystem with respect to its composition, species composition, structure, habitat structure, and functioning. So this is basically the fully restoring an ecosystem to its original reference system. This is what we call restoration, full restoration. Next slide, please. Then we also have rehabilitation, ecological rehabilitation. This is to repair the productivity of the ecosystem services in relation to the functional or structural attributes. So it's similar to restoration in terms of increasing the structure of the ecosystem and how it functions, but it's not necessarily to the same exact species composition, the exact same ecosystem type as was there before. It might be because of climate change transitioning to a different one, but still a good, healthy ecosystem. Next slide, please. And finally, we have ecological recovery. This is to return the usefulness of an ecosystem for the provision of environmental services other than those of the original ecosystem, integrating ecologically and landscape-wise to its surroundings. So this is acknowledging that it's not really going to come back to a full natural system, but it will recover some processes and environmental services and values. So this you can think of like agricultural landscapes, increasing the structure through planting some trees or multiple crop types to enhance the ecosystem services from these places. Next slide, please. So what we did is we took the restoration priority map and we identified where full ecological restoration versus rehabilitation versus recovery might be suitable. Through our analysis, we identified places for full ecosystem restoration as places which are not highly modified, and they're projected to be climatically stable. So these are places we feel that you could fully restore the reference ecosystem. Next slide, please. The next action of ecological rehabilitation, because this is really rehabilitating a good, healthy ecosystem, we still map this as needing to occur in places which were not heavily converted. However, it could be in places which are projected to undergo climate change. So this could be the biome has tended to shift, so it could be rehabilitating a different type of ecosystem. And next slide, please. And finally, ecosystem recovery. These we mapped as, this action we mapped as possible or suitable in places which are heavily modified, high footprint or full human land covers. So in these places, they cannot be restored to a natural ecosystem, but they could be enhanced through ecosystem recovery. Final slide, please. So this map shows this post hoc analysis and where within the restoration priority map, we're mapping as suitable for full ecosystem restoration versus rehabilitation versus recovery. And again, we don't need to look closely at this. After the break, I'll show you in more detail this map as well. So thank you very much for your time. I'll hand back to Cassandra to take any questions or comments.
Muchas gracias, Oscar. Entonces, si
Thank
tuviéramos
you, Oscar. So if we have any comment or question, let's take advantage that Oscar is connected with us today. He's the scientific expert of the project, so it would be great to have a chat with him. So we have the comment from Eduardo. Eduardo, we hear you. Good morning, Cassandra, Oscar, and everyone present. Again, trying to contribute a bit to this key subject for the country. As you can see, we were able to include some basic layers, but we still need to incorporate more information. But I wanted to ask Oscar, for these places where normally we should restore, I imagine according to the concept that you established or proposed, is it necessary to have a base of the of the situation of the area in order to recover it to the most close possible state of the ecosystem as it was before. So are you bearing this in mind? I imagine this should be like one of the most important factors in order to define if you are going to prioritize the restoration of these areas, considering that we have information, previous information from the baseline, from the ecology ecosystem regarding flora and fauna present in that area. I don't know if you could tell us a little bit more about that. Thank you, Eduardo. Oscar, we hear you. We will see that throughout this dialogue, there will be some pausing because of the interpretation. We are waiting for the interpretation to be completed. We hear you, Oscar.
Okay, thank you, Eduardo, for that question. I think that's a really important point. We should keep in mind that what we're doing here is a national scale analysis. So we're using the best available data that's available for the full country. In terms of mapping the potential ecosystems that could be restored, we're considering fairly broad classes. So we're looking at tropical rainforest, shrubby areas, desert areas. It's quite coarse. So I think the maps that we're producing here, no one's meant to take that map and begin restoration in all those places. It should be part of a broader process that includes consultation, even beyond what we're doing here, local communities, local actors, local biologists. And I think that kind of second phase, more detailed phase, thinking and working in landscapes, would use that more. I think the more detailed data that you're talking about, more detailed data and knowledge about the reference ecosystems, what they're composed of locally, and therefore what should guide the restoration. I think the places that we're mapping for rehabilitation, I'll show those maps a little bit later, where the climate's really projected to change significantly, and it's projected to move from one biome type to another biome type. These are places that I think you want to consider carefully. What is the objective of restoration? Is it to return a forest to a forest? If it's projected to become shrubland in the future, I think that'll raise important questions about what is the objective of restoration, those places where climate change is projected.
Muchas gracias, Oscar. Sí, Eduardo, te escuchamos.
Thank you, Oscar. Yes, Eduardo, we hear you. Thank you so much. I'm sorry that I take the floor again. This is just to complement the question. Thank you so much for your answer, Oscar. Yes, I understand it would be necessary some traditional ecology knowledge from the area to see what we had before. But I understand regarding the climate change subject and the climate effects that could be impacting this area that is going to be restored, I would consider important to that the area that's going to be restored have or has a like management system, maybe not only a reservation area, but like a spatial management area. Would that be all worth to consider within this model, Oscar? Thank you, Eduardo. Oscar, we hear you.
Okay, thank you. So as we identify these locations, priority locations for restoration, rehabilitation, and recovery, we're not specifying whether it's a management system of active restoration, so a very intense management system that involves planting native species and removing invasives, or whether it's simply protecting a place and having it undergo passive restoration, so waiting for the native seed bank to recover and to repopulate the area, and for species to move in, animal species to move in. So I think that's an important question. It's not one that we've dealt with, whether the management regime is intensive with active restoration versus more of a protection regime. But I think in the case of restoration, it's more cost effective to do passive restoration, but it's much quicker and leads to stronger outcomes to do active restoration. So I think that would be something to consider.
Muchas gracias, Oscar.
Thank you so much, Oscar and Eduardo, for your interventions presented in this dialogue. We also have in the chat the question from Silvia from FONAC. I had written it in English, Oscar, so you can read it in English directly. The consultation says, I don't have clear what's the difference between recovering and the beginning of restoration. How do you measure this? To me, that means the same, says Silvia.
Yes, in our case, with the way we're using these terms, recovery, it can be viewed as partial recovery of an ecosystem. It's not bringing it back to a full ecosystem. So you can think of, and it pertains to recovering function and structure. So you could think about agricultural land, planting trees, stopping using pesticides. This can increase the structure and the functioning of that land, but it's still not a full native ecosystem. Whereas ecological restoration, we refer then to fully restoring it close to the reference ecosystem. So it's becoming what you would look as a natural ecosystem, not a working landscape.
Muchas gracias, Oscar. Creo que con eso
Many thanks, Oscar. I think Silvia, we reckon that with that the consultation should be solved. Silvia says that this is measured. Is this measured by a percentage or is it part of a remediation process? Could you please explain that to us to clarify Silvia's
Yes, the way to look at it, it would be the objectives of the restoration. So the objective would be either full recovery of the ecosystem, or sorry, full restoration of the ecosystem, or the objective could be to rather recover some of the structure and function. And a way to look at it is on a continuous scale from fully human landscape to fully natural reference ecosystem. Recovery is partway there, and full restoration is going all the way back to a fully natural system.
Muchas gracias, Oscar, y también
Many thanks, Oscar, and thank you, Silvia, for clarifying your doubts. Excellent dialogue regarding this. So with this, we deserve 5 minutes of break, so we will have time to to drink some water, some coffee, and within 5 minutes we will retake our feedback session. So in feedback we will meet again. Thank you so much. Don't go.
So we are all back. First call as in the theater, second call, and third call. We are all here. Vera is connected. Oscar, you're ready? Let's see if we are all ready. Let's have some thumbs up. Celebration, hearts, something. Thank you all. So we are all connected. What we will do now is focus on the map of restoration areas. Oscar will go over the map and we will give feedback in the chat or raising our hands. This will be a sort of a dialogue, and we will also work on a Jamboard. Liliana will share the Jamboard with you, and Maria Veronica, if you could copy the link on the chat so that everyone has access to it. And while Oscar presents a map, we can give feedback on the Jamboard. Here, you all have option on the left. You have a post-it where you can give your comments. The first question is, all right, save so you can see the question is, what is useful, what is really missing. In the second, we have the applications for the use of the map in the country. What's the use you can see for this map, and who we should involve in the implementation phase of this map. While Oscar explains this to us, you will be able to access these comments on the Jamboard, and we will see you. So, Oscar, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Cassandra, and thank you everybody for rejoining after the short break. So this remaining hour in the consultation is, as Cassandra explains, quite dynamic. I'm going to show you the map in detail in this platform that I'll explain. But I don't really have a lot to say. I'm going to take you around the map a little bit and explain a couple of things, but this is really the opportunity now to get your feedback and your thoughts. And you have options for how to do that. You can put up your hand to speak and it'll be translated. You can put your comments in the chat. Cassandra will help me read those. And finally, the Jamboard, which is an excellent resource because that documents your thoughts and we get to retain that going forward and integrate it into any further work. So the Jamboard's a really good place to put your thoughts as well as discussing it with us. Okay, so the interface I'm showing you here is the United Nations Biodiversity Lab. It's an online tool that houses and makes available a huge amount of spatial data, as well as gives private workspaces for GIS analyses, important for international reporting on a range of aspects. Dee is going to show you in more detail the UNBL later. So I'm going to focus on the map. So this map is the priority areas which we've identified using all the data and all the methods we've talked about. These orange areas equal roughly 20% of Ecuador's land area. So quite an ambitious target if Ecuador is going to achieve the international global biodiversity framework target of restoring 30% degraded areas. As Scott mentioned, the degraded areas are spread quite broadly across Ecuador. This also applies to this priority map. You can see priorities along Ecuador's coast, Andes region, a lot of restoration priorities, as well as places in the Amazon. And I'll pan over to the Galapagos. You're seeing here also some important restoration priorities. Okay, coming back to mainland Ecuador. I'm now going to show you those, what we call the 3 R's, the priorities to recover. So these are places which are most heavily modified and might be very difficult to bring back to a full natural system. So these are places which are being identified to recover structure and function, to make them better. The next map I'm going to load is places being identified for full ecological restoration. And I'm just going to zoom in a little. So just because of how the map is shown, when we zoomed out, we don't see all the detail. When I zoom in, you can start to see that much of the map is, the priority map is made up of these blue areas, in particular to the east of the Andes Mountains. Places tend to be more intact, not as fully converted. These are being identified for full ecological recovery, whereas many of the places within the Andes itself and the coast are quite heavily modified and raise questions about whether they can be fully restored. And I have one final category. This is the category of places that are going to be affected by climate change. You can see in this purple here, if I zoom out, we start losing the area, so I almost need to pan around. You can see there are quite a few places in Ecuador which are degraded now, but they're projected to really change from one biome to another under climate change. So these purple areas are priorities for restoration, but they are ones where potentially restoration might involve not returning to the full reference ecosystem because the climate is projected to change so much. Okay, so that was a lot, just giving you kind of an overview of the restoration priority map and those sub-actions for Ecuador. I'd be happy now to zoom into any part of the map. So if anybody would like to guide me to a part of Ecuador they'd like to see, whether it's a priority for restoration, and feel free to, again, put any of your comments into the chat, or we'd really like it in Jamboard, where we can retain those comments more easily. Go just around Quito as a
Así es.
start.
Tenemos, Oscar, ya el comentario de si pudiéramos ir.
Yes, Oscar. We want to go to Galapagos. Maria Veronica wants to go to Galapagos. If you need any guidance to get there.
Okay, I think we're there. So I can see restoration being prioritized in many of the small coastline areas, as well as all of the islands of Galapagos are being prioritized for some restoration activity. I'd love to hear your feedback on whether you view these same areas as priorities for restoration within the Galapagos. I'm sorry, it looks like the imagery available for the Galapagos is not very high resolution. Oh, maybe it's just needed a minute to load. Yes.
Quizá entonces con este acercamiento, Byron Delgado, que nos comentabas para hacer el Zoom,
maybe now with this close-up, you may want to ask questions to Oscar, you can open your mic and ask questions to Oscar if you want to. Thank you. Hello. Yes, we had feedback with Veronica Cordova, and they took into account our inputs in terms of inhabited area and invasive areas. Could be the areas to take into account for priorities of restoration. I want to thank you for taking into account for restoration. I don't know what's the other stage. I cannot see what the magenta and the cyan stage mean. Maybe I understand that you will share this data and will be able to share this information with other people. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. And I've now loaded the legend back up so you could see what the colors mean. Sorry for not having that loaded before. These are our 3 actions. Okay, I might head back over to the mainland. Short flight. Maybe I'll zoom into some of the coastal areas. Let's see, so these yellow is being identified for recovery. So this is not full ecosystem, or say not full ecosystem restoration, but recovering some elements. So these are probably the more modified locations. You can see agriculture and urban areas within these coastal communities. Fairly high human footprint. But if we jump over into the Amazon, we see places again being identified for restoration.
Oscar, we have a request from Araceli to
En español,
hacer
por
un
favor,
zoom.
María Verónica,
Sí,
perdón.
sí.
Sí, María Verónica, otra vez volvemos. Sí, todavía un momento está justo recorriendo esta zona Oscar y de ahí hacemos el zoom, sí, que ya vi que ha pedido Araceli, pero en todo caso...
Yes, if you can speak in Spanish and we have a request from Araceli to go to Sierra Centro, Cotopaxi, and Chimborazo. Yes, if you can zoom up to the north. No, yeah, zoom there. Zoom up a little south and center.
Is this a location? Would you like me to zoom in any further?
Un poco más al sur.
Further south.
Un poco más abajo de la palabra Quito y hacemos un poco de zoom.
Yeah, close to Quito and then further south. Hello, thank you for the invitation. Yes, Páramo Andino, Chimborazo, that's what I would like to see.
I'd be happy to bring you there, but I might need a bit of north, south, east, west direction.
Yeah, the area of Páramos.
This looks like Paramos here to me.
Sierra Centro. Yeah. Maybe Araceli will be able to tell you where specifically.
Sí. Sí, confirma que estamos ahí ya, Araceli. Dice, ok, perfecto. Estamos ya
Yeah,
en la zona.
we are in the right area of the map to activate stages. Let's see.
I'll also load up the sub actions, the 3 R's. So you can see most of this area is yellow, being identified for recovery. It says partial recovery of ecosystems, but some areas in blue being identified for full restoration, and in purple identified for rehabilitation. So when you look at the landscape without zooming in, it all looks natural, but then you zoom in and you start to see some of the drivers of change and some of the reasons why it's being identified for restoration. So places like this, where it's small communities and small scale agriculture, these places are being identified here for. Oh, this one's not a priority. Oh, yeah, it is. So this is all showing as yellow. It's being identified for recovery. So not then restoring this full area to its natural state, but rather trying to develop programs and payments for ecosystem services that might engage local farmers and help them recover some of the ecological values and resiliency of their farmed areas.
Tenemos Oscar en el chat el comentario de
Oscar in the chat, Bernardo. I'm telling you in English. Apparently, there's an empty corridor in Morona, Santiago. There's a highway reaching the area. Why is it in white? That's the question. Maybe Maria Veronica can help you get to this area that Bernardo is pointing out. Maybe you can zoom out so that I can. Let's go to the east and south on the Amazonia, further east. Yes, zoom in there. Yes. That's where they are asking us. Maybe we should navigate there to see Bernardo's comment.
We're looking for a highway here.
Bernardo,
Hola con todos. Sí,
hello. It's further south in this area of Faisha. When we saw the general map of Ecuador, I saw that it was white. Yeah, this area.
So just to note, the white areas are actually cloud cover in the satellite imagery, so not part of our mapping.
Un poco más al norte, señala Bernardo.
Further north, Bernardo is saying.
Perdón, sí, un poco más al norte, como la zona
Yeah.
de Taisha, ella estaba en el mapa, ya nos lo pasamos.
Further north in Taisha.
Quedarle un poquito de tiempo, creo que a la interpretación para que pueda hacer la pausa donde va. Oscar, ¿puedes hacer un poco de zoom out? Porque una vez que
Zoom
out, se activa.
Maybe zoom out and we can see Taisha. That's the area we want to see.
¿Dónde está el cursor ahora mismo?
Yeah, where the cursor is. Zoom in now.
Y ahí creo que a esa distancia, eso, ahí.
Yeah, right there.
So we can see the impacts here, and I'm going to see if the degraded map is loaded here. Degraded areas for restoration. So we can see we're mapping this as degraded. However, it's not being identified as a major priority for restoration. This corridor of this highway. You can see around it, other areas are being identified in the priority mapping, but around Taisha is not. I could see this is the overall map of the aggregated benefits to biodiversity, climate change, and human well-being from restoration. So this is all the spatial data, the 30 different layers of environmental values across Ecuador. And we can see this corridor is not being highlighted through the spatial data. The brighter the color, the redder the color, the higher the environmental values. So if we look across Ecuador, the map might just take a minute to load. So again, the optimization is trying to select places which are degraded, but have a very high these environmental or potential environmental values. So you can see these red places where the priority map tries to choose if it can, whereas Taisha, I think, was here. It's relatively lower environmental values. I'm not sure if that corresponds with your understanding of the region.
Gracias, Oscar. Bernardo, tienes la libertad de abrir el micro o comentar en el chat si lo que ha explicado Oscar corresponde con tu conocimiento de la zona o algo que quieras complementarnos para el análisis. Sí, nos dice Bernardo que hay mucha degradación en esa zona Así que sí, coincide
Yes, there's a lot of degradation in that area, so it coincides with what we saw on the map, and it's to be understood that it's not a priority for restoration. We also have a comment from Sylvia telling us that it's necessary that the sand dunes from volcanoes Cotopaxi in excess and Antisana are not areas to be restored. There should be left as a natural or passive dynamic areas. Maybe Maria Veronica, you can guide Oscar to the areas near those volcanoes. So let's go back to the center of Ecuador. South of Quito. Further south, let's zoom there. Yeah, we can navigate there, and we will see the results for the area. According to what to specific restoration actions at the volcanoes in the Sierra Centro areas. Yes, we are there. Maybe we can activate the actions in the area.
The action map is activated at the moment. The yellow being the recovery areas. I think I'm on a volcano here. I'm not sure if it's the right one. I think this is another one. So it looks to me like the volcanoes themselves are not really being identified as major priorities. Maybe recognizing that the degradation mapping, the degradation mapping doesn't really map the volcano itself as degraded, but the areas around it are being mapped, these agricultural areas. Tends to be very fertile soil around, lower elevations around volcanoes, so we can see a very broad scale agriculture. All of these areas being mapped as degraded areas, and many of them as priorities for restoration as well, in yellow here. Okay, Cassandra, we're pretty close. Are there things populating on Jamboard there for you? Any feedback or comments there?
Sí, estamos recibiendo los comentarios.
Yes, we are receiving feedback on the Jamboard. I'm checking. We have explained all of them to you. There are no new ones to be checked on the map. We are waiting for them to answer the questions that we asked them about stakeholders for the application in decision making in public policies in Ecuador, while we go over the different regions in the country and checking all the layers, while Oscar helps us. And next, we'll have the presentation of Disan, helping us with this that Oscar is showing us right now.
Okay, excellent. So if there's no more requests to pan around the map, then I suggest maybe we transition to the Jamboard and make sure that we get some discussion around partnerships and the applications of all of this project and leave a bit of time for the final presentations and wrap up. So I might just verify there's no other requests for places to zoom to, and if not, I might stop my share and hand over.
Acá tenemos, a ver, un comentario. Tenemos un comentario.
There's a comment, Oscar, from Eddie, saying, have you considered giving the map as an entry so that the local agents can do this? We'll give the explanation as to get to this private place in the UN lab. The application is the Environment Ministry, and you'll be able to access this space, and you'll be able to use it for decision making. We'll share that information with you and with D, and D is answering in the chat. So yes, we have received several information, comments about the map of restoration areas.
Una sugerencia es poder validar esto con el equipo técnico del MATE y la unidad de monitoreo. También si es que consultan, si es que se ha considerado las probabilidades de incendios, eso podemos revisarlo con las capas de datos. Y nos mencionan también acerca de...
And they also mention about... I have a microphone opened, or I think it was the switch of the interpretation, no worries. So there we also have the monitoring models. Through them we can see the implementation and costs issues or topics, that those are topics that we can review. The most important thing is that after this session, we will send the second draft of the dossier with all the relevant information and the review of the layers for a last feedback from you within 2 weeks time. So Veronica, we will be able to review that, right? In the second question, if we can move to the second question, please, about the applications for the analysis. We have the potential use of this map of priority areas for restoration. We have here, they have written the observations about the interest areas, but not necessarily about the use of this map in the country. Could we consider that? And remember that this link is going to be active during these weeks when we will be able to review it with you. My colleagues also are going to help me to copy this message, right, Silvia? For the Next question about the páramos. My recommendation is for the restoration, we have to bear in mind the vegetation present in the normal state, and if it's not necessary, an active restoration, because there are places where it's not necessary to cultivate, or would be a passive restoration. So thank you, Silvia. We are registering your feedback. Finally, we have the third question: which actors should get involved in this second phase of implementation and application of this prioritization exercise of areas for restoration, like local governments and academic actors, if you consider that we should involve them in this next phase, or government actors, if you can write that in the Jamboard, and we can talk about, discuss it all. Also, with the experience of the participants and people working in local areas, if they want to work at a shorter scale, which actors should be involved there? Like, would they be communities or specific places? It would be interesting to utilize this space. Yes, correct. At local level, with the church and universities. We also have, well, this message is duplicated. What other actors should be involved in the implementation phase, and how we can use this tool? The water banks and indigenous nationalities, we should specify this here, indigenous. We also have the NGOs that are investing in these projects with solutions based on nature. And in fact, some of them are with us today in this session, or the international cooperations like the GNCIT. Perfect. So, sorry, Maria Veronica, a last comment. We hear you. Yes, to mention also that there are platforms, structured platforms, that manage restoration topics in case the participants want to see these platforms and the spaces of work that and all of these restoration topics. It would be interesting to have them as allies. So moving from the indicative phase to a more implementation phase. Yes, I will write that in the Jamboard. And yes, when they share the information package with us, we will share the link again if you wish to add some more information. I can see that they are commenting regarding the previous questions. Thank you so much. With this, do you think that we can pass or move over the next presentation, which is one of the few opportunities that we have? Anyway, don't worry about running with the presentation. Take your time. This is the space that you will have in the biodiversity lab, which Oscar talked about that to us. And also, it's important to bear in mind the restoration project. When all the questions relevant are answered, we will focus on this work for the implementation. We hear you, Dee.
Thank you, Cassandra. Hi again, everyone. I'm Dee. In this restoration project, besides the restoration maps and the dossier report, we also provide you an interactive mapping platform to view and download all these output layers online. And that's the same platform Oscar just demonstrated with the result map, the UN Biodiversity Lab. So next, I will briefly introduce you this platform to help you get started to explore these spatial data. To start with, I am gonna share the link of this platform to the chat. This is the Spanish version, and we offer 5 different languages on this platform. All right, so what is UN Biodiversity Lab? This is a UN level, free and open source platform with many of the best available global spatial data sets in biodiversity, climate change, and sustainable development. It doesn't require GIS expertise to use and to view all the data resources. The initial version of UN Biodiversity Lab was created 5 years ago, specifically to support parties in their commitments to the CBD, with a focus on the 6th national report to the convention. As we evolve, we developed more functionalities to support policymakers and diversified users from all over the world with resource to access spatial data and use them to strengthen their capacity in conserving and sustaining nature for people and planet. Our goal is to continue provide resources that can be adapted to national context and support countries based on their existing capacity and needs. As an overview, there are 6 key features in UNBL. Later, we have the chance to explore many of these functionalities in greater detail, focusing on how these functionality can support ecosystem restoration, especially in the use case of our project. We start with the global data. Currently, there are over 400 global data layers on biodiversity, carbon, and sustainable development. And more than 70% of them are open access data that you can freely use and download on our platform. And when click on any countries or in the places tab, the map will zoom into this place with a left panel of summarized statistics based on 8 global indicators, including biodiversity intactness, carbon density, time-lapse data on enhanced vegetation index and tree cover loss, as well as human footprint changes and protected areas. These data can be downloaded, statistics can be downloaded in a CSV format for further analysis. And for global data related to ecosystem restoration, recently we launched a restoration data collection. This collection provides key resource for planners and decision makers to identify restoration needs and where to take actions. Here we categorized restoration into 3 distinct types, depending on the objectives of restored ecosystems. As on the right side of my slide, this include restore degraded natural area to more intact natural ecosystem, or improve ecosystem service of degraded modified ecosystem. And the third type is to restore modified ecosystems to its natural state. The data collection has gathered many useful global data sets on restoration, such as nature map data on areas of global significance of restoration, the Forest Landscape Integrity Index, and World Atlas of Desertification, also data to indicate biodiversity intactness. To view this collection, you can scroll down the homepage of UNBL find the Discover section. There are 3 different types of data collections already. And when you click on ecosystem restoration, you can start navigate the collection page and the global data listed there. Then for all the national level data we used in this project, they can be viewed and managed through secured workspace. This is another unique function of UNBL. This is for countries and stakeholders to upload and manage their own data through a secured working environment. And this is free for all non-commercial users to apply workspace with us and use for their own project and research. As Oscar just presented, we have a national workspace set up for Ecuador already. And thanks for our enriched collaboration across many projects, this workspace now provides a really comprehensive data resource for national scale data. You can find almost 60 national level spatial data. This include all the restoration priority maps in this project, the input planning features the prioritization analysis is built on. When you select the data tag, Restoring Hope, you can view them all in the layer list. Other than that, this workspace also hosts data from the ELSA project and from our collaborated project with Ecuador on SDG 15. So there are specific layers on forest connectivity, climate change developed for Ecuador. And then when you loaded the data you need, you can also easily create and style your own maps on UNBL for the use in reports, studies, and communication products. Finally, if you're interested to join the workspace and explore these data interactively, I will highlight 2 easy steps here. First is to register an account with UNBL. The workspace is secured environment, so it does need unique identifier to add members to it. And after your registration, you can contact this workspace administrator, Daniel, and copy me for assistance. And if you simply want a new workspace for your own work, you can also email me for further instructions. I hope my brief introduction is helpful. Thank you, and over to you, Cass.
Muchísimas gracias a ti, Di, por la
Thank you so much, Dee, for the presentation. And if you have any comment or question, bear in mind that Dee is connected today as well. Your presentation was very clear, and I would like to remind you that all of you will receive all the information presented today, including the draft of the dossier, the second draft that my colleague Maria Veronica, she's copying the link of the document to the document in linea to hear your comments with the change control in writing. That you will be able to enter your comments and suggestions, and this will be available together with the file of the documents and data used and the instructions to be able to make part of this private space of work by the UN Biodiversity Lab. You will be able to access all layers and navigate in your interest areas. If you require to have a specific session of advice to use this tool, you can contact Disan or Maria Veronica or any of us, we will give you the instructions in the Veronica's email. With this, the team will prepare a version for the end of the document of the dossier of the Restoring Hope for Ecuador dossier, and it will be shared with you at the beginning of December. We will close the year with this document for Ecuador, so we will know the priority that this means for the country. Many thanks, everyone, for your commitment in this to this session, not only this one, but all the rest from the beginning. Before closing, I would like to thank all the to to thank the entire team that made possible this project in general, and it will take like an entire town to be able to be connected today. In the first place, the country office of the UNDP, thank you so much for joining us, especially Matilde Mora, the representative from Ecuador, and Monica Andrade, who gave the welcoming words today, and Arturo Mora and Diego Molina and Alejandro Amparo from Pro Amazonia, who is with us, who are with us today and have given us the comments and feedback on this Ecuador project. Many thanks to Veronica Cordova, who has coordinated with all of you who are present today, and she will continue this and so if you are with us today, we still have time. Maria Veronica has all the information based on the registry that you performed for this application. Maria Veronica, they are uploading your efforts in this dossier, and its use for the excellent use for the country. And thank you so much to the um, to everyone, and Nora Salazar and Nora Zambrano, Daniel Borja, Stephanie Alvaro, Pablo Casas, Johnny Vena, Byron Salgado, who have worked close with Veronica. And I'm sorry if I missed any name. And thank you so much to the staff from the Ministry of Environment, Water and Ecology Transition. And thank you so much. I would also like to thank our colleagues from the National Park of Galapagos that are with us today. Eduardo Espinosa, thank you so much for your feedback. You even mentioned that it is actually reflecting the exercise with Oscar. I would also like to thank for the importance of the work by Emerson Journey to inspire us for this project so important for Ecuador, together with the team that is with us today, Enrique Paniagua, Veronica Recordo, and the interpreter apologizes for any name left out, and especially to the technical staff that have created and experts that have made this possible. Oscar and the rest of experts that have been with us today. Thank you so much to the interpreters also. Very great, thank you. As always, we end up running. And finally, the most important thing, perhaps to thank you, all of you, the participants, for all your feedback and the possibility that you allowed for this project, and all of this great agility of being able to have such productive sessions and optimizing your time. We are very grateful, and formally we are now closing our consultation process of this project, and we are about to close the Restoring Hope Project for Ecuador. Many, many thanks, and let's keep in contact. You all have our coordinates for contact, and Veronica will get in touch through email. Thank you so much. We have several emojis of reaction emojis, and thank you so much to everyone for your amazing active participation. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Thank you. Thank you.
Corazones, gracias.
Lots of hearts. Thank you so much.
Gracias, gracias. Gracias a ustedes, gracias Stephanie.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephanie, Eric, and all the rest. Thank you so much. Maria Veronica, you are the organizer to close the session. Thank you so much.